Hi, my name is Nathan Richardson. The title of my presentation is The Practice of Polygamy and Its Proper Indications. The related unit of study is Unit 11 on eternal and plural marriage, and the major concept was Joseph's practice of plural marriage and its own indications. The type of doctrine I wrote as policy. Practicing polygamy was only for that time period and was reserved for the church at that time. We no longer follow that, and therefore, doctrine itself, the supporting and core doctrines don't change. Policy and esoterica do, and so I chose policy because it was very big and it did point to supporting doctrine. Two related articles that I read were Eternal Marriage and Plural Marriage by Andrew Hedges, and then a different article called Line by Line, or Line Upon Line, Joseph Smith's Growing Understanding of the Eternal Family. The first article, Eternal Marriage and Plural Marriage, really focused on the idea of the basics of plural marriage and how it came to be, but also the practice therein, how Joseph Smith used a lot of discretion with the Lord's help to choose who could practice plural marriage while he was. And at the same time, that there isn't really anything that supports continual usage of polygamy within the church. And so it really focuses on the fact that we don't practice it now, and nor is it required for exaltation and living with God forever. The second article I thought was really interesting. It focused on the early experiences of members of the church in plural marriage and their idea of why it needed to be followed. And so within this, we were talking about creating a dynastic change or a chain where they were linking together families to be sealed together. So it was one big eternal family. And I thought that was an interesting perspective to look at it, rather than focusing on, I get to have multiple wives. That's not a very good idea or outlook to have, but rather we're creating a bigger family so that we can take care of each other more. There were a couple talks that talked about this. The Gospel Topics Essay on Plural Marriage in the days of the early church was pretty interesting, really focusing on the very basics of plural marriage and how it came to be. Within a talk back in 1879 by Charles Penrose, it's called The Work of the Restitution of All Things. The futility of the efforts of its opponents should not cherish animosity to enemies. This talk really focused on the pointed doctrine behind polygamy. So rather than focusing on polygamy itself, it was talking about celestial marriage and the importance of the sealing power and the priesthood power within that to be able to be sealed with our families forever, and the importance of that. There were two Doctrine and Covenants verses within Doctrine and Covenants 132 that I wanted to read, simply because they really focus well on how the Lord justifies these things, right, and how he has discretion. So Doctrine and Covenants 132:1 states, Verily thus saith the Lord unto you, my servant Joseph, that inasmuch as you have inquired of my hand to know and understand wherein I, the Lord, justified my servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as also Moses, David, and Solomon, my servants, as touching the principle and doctrine of their having many wives and concubines. This first verse really focuses on, so the Lord justifies these time periods and specific instances where he doesn't condemn people for having multiple wives. This basically states that these prophets were justified by the Lord in having multiple wives. This next verse, however, kind of goes into the next point. And it says, And everything that is in the world, whether it be ordained of men, by thrones, or principalities, or powers, or things of name, whatsoever they may be, that are not by me or by my word, saith the Lord, shall be thrown down, and shall not remain after men are dead, neither in nor after the resurrection, saith the Lord your God. And I think this is a really important aspect of the idea of polygamy, is just that God has discretion. He chooses when to follow it and when not to follow it. And when people go out of their way to try and follow this, like have multiple wives, for example, and that's out of the discretion of God, then it's not okay, and he will make sure that it's justified according to his justice, right? Joseph Smith Paper's quote from the introduction to one of the journals states that the stipulation of prophetic direction meant that the practice was carefully controlled, however, and those who took plural wives on their own initiative faced serious consequences. And so that just reiterates Doctrine and Covenants 132:13, talking about the consequences that come from not following God. Two key concepts and one takeaway from this. The practice of polygamy is not God's standard. However, he can use his discretion when polygamy needs to be used on the earth. This can be in times to raise up seed, which can be referenced in Scripture. But typically his standard is monogamy. Concept 2, the practice of polygamy pointed towards a more important doctrine, which is sealings for eternity. Within this, we believe that one can be sealed to their family for eternity according to God's law. The major takeaway from this whole project and understanding of polygamy is that the practice of polygamy within the early days of the restored church points to the eternal doctrine of everlasting sealings. The reason that they followed polygamy back then was not as important as understanding the policy now, which is not following polygamy, and understand that as we are faithful to the covenants that we make in the temple, especially the new and everlasting covenant of marriage, we can be sealed to our family and to God forever. Thank you.